Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to go over your second major writing project and introduce the community-based argument and talk about kind of the expectations here and what you're going to be doing for this paper. So kind of building on the first paper, the rhetorical analysis where you were looking at the arguments made by others, you are now going to be making your own argument. And this one is a little more, I don't want to say a little more casual, but a little less formal than the third paper, the scholarly argument will be. And so community-based argument, kind of what that means is that you are writing for a particular community. And the purpose of this paper is to inform your community about the complexity behind a certain issue. So if you think about it, a lot of times we always kind of hear about things affecting us, and we might have a snap judgment that, oh, I'm for or against this, or think it's good or bad. And when in reality, a lot of times the issues are more complex than we might think. A new grocery store or Walmart in a local community might seem like a bad thing or a good thing to somebody, but it might be good or bad for other people depending on their point of view. And so what this assignment asks you to do is to look at some community issue and think about kind of all the different groups at play and kind of how they where they stand on the issue, really kind of inform the reader why this is a complex issue. So this is an argument to inform, which means you are not actually going to be proposing a course of action in this paper. So the goal of the paper is not to say, here's what we need to do. The goal of the paper is to say, here's why this is such a complex thing and why we might kind of reevaluate our opinions or think about, what we maybe more broadly might take as the next step, but not maybe to understand the issue more. So with that in mind, you're thinking about first off, who the community is you want to be writing to. And this community can be defined in a lot of different ways. So that can obviously be kind of what we think about as geographical communities like Topeka, Lawrence. It can be organizations, churches, clubs, fraternities and sororities, universities like Washburn, sports team, right? It could be any sort of different kind of groups like that. And not just kind of, it can be something at a regional level, so something that kind of affects, Western Kansas or Eastern Kansas or something, like the Northeast or something like that. And it can also be, think about it, we exist in a lot of kind of digital communities, as, you were looking, many of you looked at in the first paper, right, when you're thinking about platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, things like YouTube, things like that. These are all also communities as well. They're online communities. And so, they have their own kind of issues as well. So you can really think about communities in a lot of different ways. And if you have a question about what would work or doesn't work in terms of community for this paper, please let me know. The only thing that I ask is that you keep it, if you're going geographical, that you keep it kind of contained at the state level. So that doesn't mean you have to look at something in Kansas necessarily. It could be any state. But I don't want you looking at something nationally, in part because the goal of this assignment is to talk to a particular community, a particular audience in the process. So it doesn't mean that the issue can't be in some way something that affects more people than just Kansas, but you're looking at how it kind of plays out, particularly in Kansas or whatever state you choose. So one of the things you need to do is, as soon as you kind of know your community and your audience, is that you're going to sit down and think about who it is that you're talking to and what do they already know about this topic, right? In some cases, they might know nothing. And one of your first jobs might be just kind of inform people that, hey, this issue exists and you need to pay attention to it. In some cases, they might know about it and have a very particular opinion already. And so in that case, there's a difference between kind of an unknowledgeable audience and a resistant audience. So you're thinking about who they are and what they know. So once you've kind of figured that out, the next step is to really kind of think about why is this a complex issue? So part of your research for this paper, which is going to be more intensive than the last paper, is thinking about who are all the kind of parties involved in this, what are the kind of different views, what all is kind of coming together to kind of make this something complex, and how do we kind of understand that? Why do we need to understand in those terms? So you're going to be reading about several different genres for this unit: arguments of fact, definitional arguments, causal arguments. And so an argument to inform often kind of relies on some of these, and you won't necessarily be using all of them, but you might be using one or two of them in the process. And so you're thinking about all how this kind of helps show the larger complexities behind the issue you're getting at. And you notice for this paper, there's that question in italics. So what you're ultimately trying to do is inform your audience why the issue needs to be addressed and why it exists or persists. And then convince them how they should understand or interpret it, right? So this is where you're saying this isn't as simple. This isn't kind of a surface level thing. Now, part of the reason that you have a community is because one of the things you need to do is keep your argument specific and focused. The broader you get, the more difficult it is. So your goal is to really kind of tell them, hey, here's why this is a complex issue. Here are the different groups involved, whether that's kind of just different people for and against something, or thinking about a business. Well, here's how it affects kind of small businesses, and here's why the town council is for it, the chamber of commerce is for it, and here's why the company is for it, and why other people are against it for environmental reasons or whatever. So you're looking at kind of all those different aspects. Again, keep in mind this is an argument to inform, not propose. So you are not laying out a course of action in the paper. So you should stop. You should stop short of doing that. So really you're focusing on telling us, kind of peeling back the layers and saying, here's everything at play here. You're going to be using, like I said, some more outside research. So you should use a kind of a good blend of summarizing, paraphrasing, and direct quotes. Now, you shouldn't be using any long block quotes in this paper. And if you do, you'll be penalized for doing so. Really, you're using the evidence to kind of back up and support your claims. So you're making the argument and you're finding the research to support what you're saying. The sources that you find need to be current, varied, and relevant to what you're talking about. And at no point should they kind of take over your paper. This is where this goes back to the lengthy block quotes. If I see a lot of those, your voice is gone, right? We don't see what you're saying. We see what everybody else is saying. So we should see your argument and your points throughout the paper, and then see your sources kind of backing up what you're saying. Now, in terms of those sources, for this paper, you need to find 5 to 7 sources, outside sources, to use for your argument, and they should be informative and or persuasive. So they should all be current. Generally, they should be published within the past 1 to 2 years, and they should be relevant to your topic. If you have the opportunity, you can do primary research, and that's kind of doing an interview with somebody you know. But given the time frame for this paper, that may or may not necessarily be feasible. So otherwise, you might look at kind of more trade or popular, what we call trade or popular sources like magazines, local newspapers, websites, things like that. At least one source needs to be a scholarly article from a journal or a book on this topic. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that most likely you will not find a scholarly argument talking about the specific issue in your community. So that is the one source that might be, it might seem a little bit older, maybe it could be 5 years or so older, and it might not be specifically about your topic, but it should be relevant and kind of tie in some way in some kind of larger picture. So if you're talking about educational funding in Kansas, you might not find an article that talks specifically, or a scholarly article that talks specifically about educational funding in Kansas, but it might be in a similar state or kind of, nationally. And then you can kind of think about how does this information on a national level kind of play out on the state level here in Kansas or something like that. To find scholarly sources, I recommend using the Maybe Library databases, which you have access to. And really, Academic Search Complete is the one I recommend. Google Scholar is a hot mess, and sometimes will give you good stuff, but a lot of times gives you weird stuff. But you need to make sure that it is a scholarly peer-reviewed article. That is on you to kind of double-check the source and where it's coming from. So in terms of selecting a topic, there are some guidelines here. Now, these are guidelines and kind of helping you just kind of think about what's going to work for this paper. So one, it's got to be a current issue. That means it's got to be ongoing. So it can't be something that's already been solved or is no longer relevant. So it needs to be, like I said, local or state level and scale if you're going geographical, or limited to a particular community. You're not thinking national or global for this topic. So number 3 is it can't be any hot button issue, which means including but not limited to abortion, capital punishment, gun control, the drinking age, legalizing marijuana, immigration, gay marriage, teen pregnancy, things like that. It doesn't mean that you can't talk about something related to those issues as long as it's specific and focused, but I don't want you to just kind of generally talking about this giant concept. So I've had people who have looked at things like campus carry or concealed carry on campus in Kansas or other states. That's something you can look at that affects a particular community that isn't just about gun control. So if you have an idea like that, that can work. And if you have questions, let me know. You send me an email, and I'm glad to tell you whether it works or not. And the last one is the topic needs to be specific and focused. So the example I give there is that, cyberbullying is really broad, kind of cover so many different things anywhere on the internet. Whereas free speech on Twitter is still kind of a broad topic, but is much more focused. It's on a particular community, and then that's a good starting point. So as with the first paper, you'll be submitting a topic paragraph, and I'll be checking your topic and letting you know whether it works. And then you notice they're kind of thinking about your audience too. So the audience is that community you're writing to. Same length as the previous paper, 1,500 words, max 2,000 words. Again, that's the body of the paper. Doesn't include the header, title, works cited page. Again, you're writing in MLA 8th edition format. Same kind of formatting stuff. You need to cite all of your outside sources in the body of the paper, and they need to be listed on the works cited page as well. They should be in both places and done correctly. So now there is an extra component for this assignment from the first one. So you will have that topic paragraph. Like I said, that's going to be 10 points, and that's going to be due Wednesday, June 6th. So I know it's pretty quickly on the heel of the rhetorical analysis, but we just kind of don't have much time. And I want to get to your topics as soon as I can and make sure you're on the right track for this paper. A couple days later, on Friday, June 8th, you will have a source list to do, and it's an evaluative source list. And this is worth 15 points. And what that's going to be is basically two things. The first part will be basically kind of a draft of the works cited page with all the sources you found. So you need those 5 sources, one of which is an academic source in MLA 8th edition format. And then you'll have a 250 to, I think, 500 word write-up, I think what it says on D2L. And that's just kind of evaluating the sources and saying, here's what I've found, here's the information that they're going to bring to this paper, here's how you think you're going to use them for the draft. So that'll give me an opportunity to just kind of look at your sources, see what you have, and say, does this work? This seems to be good. Or maybe you need to find a couple other sources or think about varying them or something like that. Now, when you turn that in on the 8th, I'll try to get your feedback over the weekend on that weekend by the 9th or the 10th. But keep in mind too, you are not locked into the sources that you present on that source list. So if you submit 5 sources on Friday, as you start working on the paper, you realize, oh, 2 of these sources don't work and I need to find other stuff. That's totally fine. That's part of the process. I'm not holding you to the 5 sources on the source list. You're just kind of showing me what you found so far in terms of research wise for the paper at that point. So, and then again, the following week, that Monday, June 11th, I've designated as a work day to give you time to work on the draft. So you have the weekend and Monday and Tuesday basically to be working on the paper. And you'll have, again, that community-based argument progress days. Progress will be due on Monday, June 11th by the end of the day. And then the final draft will be due the end of the day on Tuesday, June 12th. You'll notice there's a slight change in the point breakdown from the last paper, and that content's just a little bit less. It's 65 points instead of 70. Organization remains at 15. But MLA format and works cited has gone up to 15 because you're using more sources and you're using them in very specific ways in this paper. So there's a little bit more emphasis on making sure you incorporate and cite your sources correctly, or cite your sources correctly in the body of the paper as well as on the works cited page. And then grammar and mechanics again are 5 points. So, so that's the overview for this paper, especially if you have questions, if you're having trouble thinking about kind of a topic or a community, or you're not sure whether an idea meets those guidelines, please email me, let me know. I'm glad to kind of help out however I can. And that's why I want to look at your topic papers as early as I can for this paper, or your topic paragraphs as I can as early as possible for this paper, just to make sure you're on the right track there. But please, if you have questions about that, if you want to set up a time to meet and talk about a draft, as always, just let me know, and I'm glad to do that. Otherwise, I am interested to see what you all come up with for this paper, and looking forward to reading it. So.